2007 is first of all a legacy problem. It is not China's problem. It is not India's problem. It's our problem. In fact, Al Gore said yesterday, climate change is not a me problem, it's a we problem. Secondly, I think we still, and particularly with China now, have to help the public understand that when China builds 2 coal-fired power stations a week, first of all, it's not a crime against humanity in historical terms, because it is the very reason why the United States didn't join the Kyoto Protocol, economic self-interest, having to keep the lights on in their country, and not having many alternatives right now economically, and also recognizing that while they're building 2 coal-fired power stations a week, nobody seems to say in brackets behind it, quite a lot of these are replacing older, smaller, and much more polluting coal-fired power stations, conveniently left out of virtually every press statement. Turning China into the big climate, in a sense, perpetrator right now, is a politically dangerous maneuver. Not every developing country accepts its role in addressing climate change as seriously as China does today. You will not see China here, obviously, coming forward with great international commitments. And, by all rational expectations, that should not surprise anyone. Because, first of all, the industrialized nations have yet to deliver their Kyoto commitments. Some of them are already now indicating that they will not even meet their Kyoto commitments. And thirdly, the developing world is saying, well, rhetoric is one thing. Once you start really implementing the kinds of cuts that you're now talking about, we will believe that this is not just a theoretical commitment. So a lot of distrust, a lot of historical inequity also in the whole carbon debate. Already today, 20%, almost 20% of all investment in renewable energy on the world market, $100 billion last year, is happening in China. There is no question about it. China is an environmental disaster in the year 2007. There is also no question in my mind that the leadership in China has a greater understanding of the threat of environmental degradation to its future economic well-being than most nations on this planet. And in progress in China are some of the most far-reaching public policy and also technological reforms that will change the pathway of China's economic development path, but also environmental footprint over the next decade. It is in the nature of China and China's culture and the Chinese politics with the rest of the world that they will not present these at the moment to the international community. So you see China here in a constructive, positive mode, but very much in a G77 camp. But as a global player, I think people need to study much more deeply what China is doing about CO2 emissions, about decoupling energy growth from GDP growth, about dealing with environmental pollution, about investing in forests. How many people know that China has been increasing its total forest cover for the last 20 years, compensating not only for its own loss, but in fact for the parts of forest loss in the rest of Asia? Yes, at the same time it is hoovering up resources from all over the world. It's an incredibly difficult equation for China to manage at the moment, but it's one where I have the greatest hopes that China will be a leading nation in addressing the medium-term challenge of carbon emissions. Right now, I think we need to look at China, and I had a meeting yesterday with the German Development Corporation Minister where many Germans asked, why is Germany giving development aid to China? It's absurd. I think it's the best investment, coming back to technology transfer, technology partnerships. It's not development aid in the traditional sense. Development cooperation with China today is about forming partnerships in a global economic and technology context that I think will provide us with a baseline that by 2020, China has far more to gain from having its own international commitments in place than not to have so. Let me not give a false impression. The biggest polluter of CO2 will next year be most likely China. And the statistical game per capita and so on is a dangerous one, because you could also argue, why don't we go per hectare? Or why don't we go per something else? I mean, the ultimate goal has to be, to come back to your point, the IPCC margin. If we do not achieve, and we have very clear margins for bringing down carbon in the atmosphere, if we do not achieve that by 2020, 2030, 50, then we are failing. And those have to be the milestones against which everything is judged. Who leads first and who follows later, and how the curve of one grows while the other one maybe takes longer and then goes up. that is a matter of international politics and diplomacy that should not pervert the absolute goals and margins that the IPCC set. And I think that's very critical.